Hi, Douglas Simonson here, coming to you from Mexico with another painting demonstration video. Today with a special emphasis on color mixing. Today I'm going to be painting Antonio at Diamond Head Beach. I met Antonio through a mutual friend when he was visiting Honolulu, and he said he'd like to model for me. I took one look at him and I said, yes, definitely. So we met at my apartment on a weekday morning, very early, and headed for Diamond Head Beach. Diamond Head Beach was my favorite spot in those days for photo sessions because I knew if you went at sunup, there would be almost nobody there and you could take nude photos. Plus, it was a beautiful setting. So that's where I shot the photo that I'm going to be working from today. And if you want to see more of Antonio, there is an ebook with the best photos from that session, and you can find it on my website in the ebooks section. This is the photograph I'm going to be working from today. And as usual, I have tweaked it in Photoshop to make it easier to paint from. And if you want to know more about how I do this, you can check out my video on this channel using Photoshop to make photos easier to paint from. One of the great advantages of having the tweaked version is it greatly reduces the number of colors, and that makes it a lot easier to mix the colors you need. Today's painting is more of an acrylic sketch than a full-on painting on canvas. It's on paper, so the setup that I'm using makes it a lot easier for you to see everything, including how I mix the colors. First, I'm sketching it out in pencil, working from my computer screen. And then, when the sketch is done, I start mixing my colors. First, I squeeze some white out. Then I start squeezing out my colors. You can see here the main colors I use. Burnt umber, burnt sienna. Here I'm squeezing out some ultramarine blue. Then alizarin crimson, which is a cool red. Then yellow oxide, an earth yellow. And then burnt sienna, and then burnt umber. Burnt sienna is a really warm brown, almost orangey. And burnt umber is a cool, very dark brown. And the last one I squeeze out is raw sienna, which is a kind of an earth yellow that's more toward brown, and it's very handy. Okay, the first color I'm mixing is a super dark flesh tone, and I'm using alizarin crimson, ultramarine blue, and burnt sienna for this. Next, I'm doing a medium dark flesh tone, and I'm using raw sienna, burnt sienna, and I've just squeezed out some cadmium red medium, which is a super warm red, and now I've got my medium dark flesh tone. Next, I want a light flesh tone, so I'm using yellow oxide, both reds, the warm cadmium red and the cool alizarin, and some white. And then I mix an even lighter flesh tone, but this time I add more alizarin, so it's pinker. I like to vary my lighter flesh tones with mixes that are more toward yellow against mixes that are more pink. I just really like the way they look next to each other. And now I'm mixing colors for the foreground, which is sand. And I'm using raw sienna and yellow oxide together because those are great sand colors. But then I'm adding some alizarin and ultramarine because I want to tone it down. Just remember, you can always tone down a yellowish color with its complement, which is purple. And I'm ready to paint. I'm starting with the darkest flesh tones, and then I'm moving on to the medium flesh tones, and then the lighter flesh tones. Now the sand. You can see I'm not copying the photo exactly. I'm using both the original photo and the tweaked version and kind of doing something in between. This is why I like having two versions to work from. I can take what I want from each one. Now I'm mixing the greens for the background, and I'm squeezing out my two favorite greens, sap green and hooker's green. Hooker's green is so dark it's almost black, but it's still a green, and it's great for the darkest shadows in the forest or the jungle. I like to sometimes add some yellow oxide to it. Next, I mix a lighter shade of green, but this is still pretty dark. There are no bright greens in the sunlight in this picture. So I add yellow oxide to my sap green, and then to tone it down, I add a little bit of alizarin crimson. And now I'm putting in the darkest greens behind the figure. Now I'm mixing a reddish brown mix because I see that in the background. Even though it doesn't show up in the original photo, I can see it in the tweaked version and I kind of like it. So I'm going to use that. And for some reason I added some blue and made it more toward the purple. I don't remember why I did that, but let's just see how it works out. So then I paint in the purplish tones and then add some of that medium green I mixed up. And then I take some of the same yellowish brown I used for the sand. Repeating colors here and there in your painting is not cheating. It's actually a good thing to do because it can unify your composition. Now I'm adding that bit of blue to the lower left, which adds a bit more color interest to the painting. And now I'm taking some of that purplish tone I mixed for the background and modifying it a bit so I can use it for the shadow that Antonio is casting on the sand. Now I'm adding finishing touches everywhere using all the colors I've already mixed. And voila, we have a finished acrylic sketch, and I call it Antonio Nude at Diamond Head Beach. Thanks for watching. I hope you got some tips today you can use, especially with all that color mixing. And keep in mind that these are my color mixtures, and if you experiment and find something else that works better for you, that's great. If you did enjoy today's video and you'd like to see more, please do me a favor and subscribe to my channel. And if you watched me paint and you got a little inspired, great. Go, put on your painting pants and go paint.